What's going on, everybody, and welcome to the first ever Loot Box Podcast. My name is Eric.
My name is Tom.
My name is Zach.
And my name is Brandon.
That's right, everybody. We have a special guest today. We have my cousin Brandon here with us.
Preview.
Yep. And unfortunately, James couldn't make it tonight. He was hoping to, but because of scheduling conflicts, he wasn't able to. So he'll be joining us for the sports podcast, and hopefully will be going with us following in future gaming podcasts. All right, so this is our first gaming podcast. We've done the sports podcast for a while now. Changed the name of it twice. But this is the first gaming podcast, and we're going to be doing it in a little bit of a different way than we do the sports podcast. Normally, when we do the sports podcast, I come prepared with a long list of stories and topics. Tom does his overreactions. Zach adds his parts. James adds his parts. But for the gaming podcast, because each of us are different types of gamers, I didn't really want to pigeonhole into one type of story, because we each like different types. So the way we're going to be breaking these gaming podcasts down, it's going to be three main parts. The first one is going to be hidden gems and guilty pleasures. It's basically over the last month, what indie games have we seen, what indie stories have we heard from small developers, kind of giving light to the little guys, the guys that don't get the mainstream attention. Even if they do get the mainstream attention, they're still coming from small developers and small companies, and they deserve a little bit more recognition than maybe what they're getting. Second, we're each going to bring up one or two stories, or three stories, however many we have, to talk about the different types of gaming. And that's pretty much an open floor. So we've all got different types of stories that we're going to be talking about. That's going to be the bulk of the podcast. Finally, normally we're going to have a major story that we're going to talk about, like a couple highlight stories that have coming out. There's a few we could have gone with today, but since this is our first gaming podcast, and I wanted to kind of introduce you guys, the listeners, to what type of gamers that we are, we're going to be doing it a little bit differently. So what I've done is, for this first podcast, at the very end, we've each compiled a list of what we would consider our top 5 games that we've ever played, ever. Regardless of console, regardless of genre, what are the top 5 games that made a lasting impact on you? And each of us are going to have that, and that's how we're going to end this show. But starting off, like I said, we're going to start with the hidden gems and guilty pleasures. We don't all have to have one, but I do know for a fact that Tom has one, and I'm going to let Tom go ahead and take the floor first.
Tom does indeed have one. And it's actually a game that dropped today, and it's a pretty unique and interesting game. It's called Kingdom Come Deliverance. It's by a indie developer, not a lot of people working for them, so small developer called Warhorse Studios. That this was a crowdfunded game. It's been, I think, 4 or 5 years ago it appeared on Kickstarter, and it finally got enough money. They pitched their idea to several publishers, and Deep Silver, who is famous for the Metro series and the Saints Row series, just 2 of their famous games. They have other series, but so they proposed it to them, and Deep Silver said, "Cool, let's publish it." So they got some mainstream success. But I have a few notes here about this game if you're thinking about picking it up, because it's a very niche game, but it has the potential, if it strikes your fancy, it has the potential to be probably one of your favorite games this year. So I said indie studio Warhorse Studios. It's not a AAA title. People mistake it. They see the Deep Silver publisher on it, and they immediately assume it's a AAA title with a AAA budget. That's simply not the case. It's a very small team doing the best they can. So therefore, it's going to be very buggy. With a title this ambitious, set in the 1400s, in medieval times. Basically, the story is you're a son of a blacksmith. There's a king that is really successful, really glorious king that suddenly dies. His son takes over, and he is just the polar opposite of his father. Very lazy, kind of drives the kingdom into ruin. He pisses off the Pope by not going to his own crowning ceremony. So no one, like the nobility and the Pope and the clergy, don't like this new king. So they ask this king that's in Turkey to go over to Bohemia and pretty much take over the throne. So the Turkish king takes that as an opportunity to go pillage townships and burn things down. and the main character you play as is Henry, the son of a blacksmith in this small township. The town gets attacked and destroyed by the Turkish king. Your father gets murdered, and basically Henry goes off on this quest to liberate the kingdom from this iron grasp that this Turkish king is now laying on it. But the unique part about this game is that there's several real locations, real people. A lot of research went into this game, a lot of love went into this game. If you're a history nerd like me, you'll probably really love this game, despite all the early bugs and glitches, which there were several tweets today by the lead developer that said we're working on different patches for game stability and all that. But the big stability patch that he mentioned is still about 2 weeks away. So if you want to wait a couple weeks and then buy it when this new patch comes out, I wouldn't blame you. But it's definitely a game to look out for this year as a hidden gem. A couple more notes before I move on to someone else. It's completely in first person. So at first glance, you'll probably think it might be like a third-person game or a switching game, kind of like Skyrim was. Because a lot of people are comparing it to Skyrim, but it's only Skyrim and the fact that there's sword fighting in it. It's completely in first person, and there's no fantasy aspects to it. There's no magic, there's no dragons, there's no goblins. There's nothing like that. There's no werewolves, there's no vampires. It's just straight up medieval goodness. Everything is realistic, from the sword fighting to the dialogue to the locations. Everything is realistic to the 1400s. So it's not a fantasy RPG. It's more of a medieval, historical, non-fiction RPG. So like I said, very niche. It would have a niche fan base, niche following. But if you're into medieval history, if you're a history nerd like I am, you should definitely consider picking this game up. I think it has a lot of potential. And support a small studio for once in your life. Come on.
Yeah, and about the bugs and everything like that, I mean, for an independent studio like this, someone that hasn't really had a mainstream title, it kind of makes sense to have a little bit of a buggy opening, because I mean, you know, it's especially if it's a lot of people playing at once and it maybe not a fleshed out, you know, bugs happen. I mean, you know, Bethesda made a living off of them, so I don't think it's necessarily a detriment to the game. I think, you know, they come up with a quick patch and it should be a good turnaround.
Yep, I agree. Like I said, people misunderstand. A lot of times, this is not a AAA game. They did not get the funding that AAA game usually gets. This is all this small team at Warhorse Studios pretty much put all their effort into it. And people that are kind of giving negative reviews. I saw one review earlier, and this is the kind of thing. This is why I hate user reviews. He said, "I never played this game, and I never will." That was the first sentence in it. He's giving it a 0 because he hates melee combat in the first person. And that's all he said. Gave the game a 0. It's like, I mean, I'm not saying, like, give them a pass if the game's broken, you know? I'm just saying, like, they're a small studio, so cut them some slack, you know? Like, it's not easy to make a game, especially a game like this ambitious, when you don't get the funding that a AAA title like, you know, Mass Effect and stuff gets, you know?
Right.
So, that's all for me.
So I had one, and it's actually a game that I've played for the channel, and that was Doki Doki Literature Club. And yes, it's kind of blown up, but it was Team Salvato's first big venture into a game. And I have never played a game personally, indie developed, that had such an impact on me. Anyone that watched my playthrough of it saw how, especially towards the middle, how much it affected me mentally, how much it affected me personally. And, you know, I walked away not really knowing how I felt, and then just having this, like, wave of emotion run through my head. And I've never had a game play on that style, because, like I mentioned in my playthrough, I've always kind of avoided games that talk about anxiety, and avoided games that talked about depression, and I avoided games that tweaked on, you know, that played off of your anxiety. The flickering lights, the flashing, the, you know, changing of the screen, the thumping in your ear and stuff like that. Like, I've never been a horror fan. You know, I've never liked the environmental horrors because I freak out over them. So it was the first time I've ever like willingly put myself into that situation, and I thought the game was just masterfully done. Spectacular work from Team Salvato, and obviously it went mainstream like it definitely should have. And, you know, YouTubers picked it up on it. The reactions were the big things that everyone was talking about. The beginning of the game was obviously slow, and, you know, you could probably give a mark against that. But just the gameplay and story developing, different endings, just absolutely phenomenal. If you haven't played it, absolutely play it. Watch someone play it. You could probably watch multiple people play it and get a different reaction from it. So, I think I've seen 3 people play it, and I've seen all 3 playthroughs had something completely different than what I had, what I experienced. So, just such, you know, fine details. You could save in the wrong spot and totally screw the game up, or save in the right spot and get the perfect ending, which I didn't get. So it's just phenomenal mechanics. And Team Salvato is definitely living high up on the hedge for that one.
I've actually heard a lot about it. I never played it because it seemed like one of those. There's some like game that came out earlier, and it was more of like a visual novel things that I'm not really into. But like the meme community, that shit blew up. Mm-hmm. Like people were like making like, you know, Monica. You know, Monica is like the best waifu. Like the internet took that thing and just ran with it. Mm-hmm. And there's all the memes. I already know several characters die because I've seen the memes, but it's just interesting how like when small games like kind of like a similar thing happened with Undertale, where it's some random out of the ballpark game and the internet picks up and it just snowballs out of control to mainstream in no time. It truly, I think that would actually probably define a gem that comes out like that.
Yeah, I never heard of Doki Doki Literature Club, but watching it on the channel is pretty interesting. I did not expect a game like that to turn out how it did, so it was quite the arc.
I thought it was a dating sim at first. Like, when I first saw the pictures, I thought it was a dating sim.
We all did. We all did.
Yeah, except me. Well, yeah. I even did too.
Well, you got to know, because once again, it blew up, like
yeah.
Brandon was saying. I liked your reference to Undertale, though. That was another game that, you know, when it first came out, not a lot of people like gave it any mind, and then a lot of streamers and stuff started getting their hands on it, and it just blew up, and now people love it. You know, yeah. It just seems like games come out occasionally that just do this, that they look kind of unassuming, and then a community gets their hands on it, and it just blows up after that, and people start realizing that it is a really good game. It's kind of like 75% they're realizing it's a good game, like 25% hype, you know? And it happens very occasionally, but it does happen, and it happened for Doki Doki, and the same thing happened to Undertale. You can sort of kind of say Five Nights at Freddy's was similar.
Oh yeah, and you also say PUBG.
But of course, Scott Cawthon kept making games.
Yep.
Of course, so we'll have to see what these guys do for continuations of series or another game or something like that. Because you got to ride the momentum if you get it like Doki Doki did and Undertale did, and Scott Cawthon took that shit and rode with it in his series. Now he's like the wealthiest game developer in the world.
Yeah.
He's not. I'm exaggerating, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
It's not very recent. It was just a game that I kind of got into for the past few months. It's called The Witness. It's made by Thekla Inc. It's a puzzle adventure game. They're the company behind Braid that came out in 2008. It was critically acclaimed as a good indie game, but never reached much success outside the first year. They actually announced The Witness in 2009 and the generation of the Xbox 360 and the PlayStation 3, and they set its release for the imminent future then, and then soon TM happened and got announced for 2013, and then that got delayed to 2016. And when it finally came out in 2016, it was a very, very aesthetically pleasing game, and I watched it many times on YouTube and on Twitch. Just loved watching it. Never wanted to drop $40 for it. I just didn't think it was worth that much, and then it finally dropped down to I believe $20 on the Xbox One later last year, and I got it, and I played through it for an entire week. Like it was a blast. It was probably the best $20 I ever spent. I love that game so much. I love puzzle games because they give you an elevated sense of pride and accomplishment when you go through a puzzle game and you try and fail, and then when you finally get it, you get the satisfaction of getting another challenge. And it was just a very great game. It's very, very clean. No bugs on it from what I found on the PC, iOS, or Xbox One version. And it was very aesthetically pleasing. Can't mention that enough. And the puzzles are very challenging. They used the environment. They used different mediums for it. And it was just an overall great game. I loved it.
And for me, I wouldn't say it's a hidden gem because it's a Pokemon game, therefore it is immediately mainstream. But I would say Pokemon. I got Pokemon Moon. I got a DS recently because my friend pressured me into it. Got Pokemon Moon. Now, as you know, I played Pokemon basically side by side with you through most of our childhood.
True.
And I stopped after Pearl. That was the last one I played, and now I'm here in Pokemon Moon. And I was really blown away by how much has changed. Because I'm used to, at the start, you've got nothing. You've got like one Pokemon who's your starter, and you have to crawl your way up to get to be decent. This one, it does the opposite. The first island you're at handholds you too much for my personal tastes, but you get like 30 grand off the start. Like, you can deck yourself out with all the items you need at the very start of the game so that you don't have to scrounge for resources. But from what I hear from my friend, who's a whole like island ahead of me, because I'm on the second island now, there's like a mall, like an actual mall that you go to, and everything is ridiculously expensive. So the game scales because they give you something called an XP share at within the first half hour of the game. Mm-hmm. What the XP share does, you don't even equip it like you did in the old games. You get it, and it passively gives your entire party XP for whoever fights. So, like, I had a Caterpie that evolved and never fought a single battle. He was just in my party the whole time. So your Pokemon teams scale and they level faster, quicker, but the AI opponents you fight, they will also scale higher and tougher, to the point where I was fighting one of the trainer bosses. This dude is like 6-7 levels below me, and I actually struggled to beat him because his Pokemon were doing ridiculous damage to mine. If I hadn't had his weakness, I might have actually lost. And the thing is, there's no gyms in this particular Pokemon game. You have these trials you do, and you go to each island. I've only done the first island. I'm on the second one now. And you have to do the specific... It's a kind of a non-combat combat trial. Like, they have you do something that's not combat-related first that leads into combat. Like, in the recent one I did, there were these Marowak dancing, and you had to identify the differences between the dances, and then you fought one Marowak after the other. And then a totem Pokemon appears, which is the same you've been fighting, but it's bigger. It has a Z aura around it, which is a special effect. And it'll call for help, because Pokemon in the wild will actually call for help in this game, to where you're fighting one, you do some damage, and he calls for an exact copy of himself or maybe another Pokemon, and now you have two people to fight, and you only have one guy to fight him with. So it adds an interesting dynamic, and my friend has actually blacked out once fighting the Totem Marowak, because he just thought he could breeze through it, and he couldn't. So I'm finding it starts you off a lot quicker, so you're not trudging through the start zone so often. But it also it realizes that it has given you like a boosted start, and therefore it scales everything higher to where you need to go around and grind a little bit, because if you don't, you're going to get kicked down by these bosses.
Yeah, I've personally really enjoyed kind of the evolution that the Pokemon games have gone into, and I thought going away from gyms was a risky move at first, and I wasn't sure how I felt about it, but I agree. I think, the move to these totem Pokemons and the islands and stuff like that, and I think Ultra Moon and Ultra Sun came out, and it's a similar concept. It's just really fascinating to watch, and I'm excited. I don't know if anyone's going to mention it later, but they're talking about making a Pokemon game for the Switch. Like a legit, like a Pokemon, like for the DS, but for the Switch. So it's going to be a possibly RPG style and big and wide. It's just open world. I'm super excited to see where they could take it if they decide to bring that to that platform.
That could be interesting. I forgot to mention, in the game, you start off being able to run. You don't get a bike, thankfully. But you do get, it's kind of spoilery, but these are game mechanics. You get mounts, in a sense. Mm-hmm. The first one you get is a Tauros, and he can charge around. Naturally, it makes you go faster, but he can also break the rocks. Like, in past games, you would need someone with, like, Brick Break or something to break a rock. But it also means Pokemon can't, from what I've heard, they can't learn certain moves. So, after Tauros, you get a Lapras, I think, that lets you go around in the water. but it means Lapras water Pokemon also can't learn Surf because Surf is how you get around. Like I can use a Charizard as a flying teleport, but he's not in my inventory. I don't own a Charizard. He's just like a taxi I call. So it also means air Pokemon can't learn Fly, which is it's interesting how mechanically how they've decided to go with this.
Yeah, the fact that they took away HMs is a pretty interesting move for a Pokemon game, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And I know like there was they wanted to move away from pretty much you had to assign, this is gonna sound bad, but you pretty much had to assign an HM whore a lot of the time. Like don't get me started on freaking Gold, man, where you have to teach a Pokemon like Waterfall, Whirlpool, and like Surf at the same time, and it's like that's
you're not at the mercy of them knowing
spots.
a move. Yeah.
And it's like, so you might as well just go catch a freaking like Poliwag or something, and just teach him all the water moves, and then have him as a 6th person in your party, just little level 6 Poliwag, knowing what Waterfall and Whirlpool and Surf, and just so I can get to the Elite Four.
And thanks for reminding me. I forgot to mention TMs are infinite use in this one. You
Yeah, I
can't
do
sell them
remember
anymore,
that.
but they're infinite use. For those who don't know.
Interesting.
Today I learned.
Yeah, I'm actually looking forward to Pokemon on the Switch. There's so much they can do, obviously, with it. If they decide to go that direction, they could just make another 3DS game. But I feel like
Pokemon for iOS and Android.
Yeah.
that'd be pretty
beautiful
swag,
game.
actually. But
Or another
yeah,
another Pokemon. Was it Pokemon Coliseum?
or the Pokemon Stadium.
I remember that.
There's been a lot of rumors talking about. We'll just have to wait for that big Nintendo Direct that they actually announced new stuff about Pokemon.
They could sell Pokemon on iOS and Android for $10, and they could make millions upon millions of dollars in weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's that the entire millennials generation would buy the hell out of that.
Oh yeah, I mean Final Fantasy did that. Final Fantasy came out with I think it was 9 or 8. I think it was one or the two or both of them. They came out on iOS, and there was a period of time where when it first launched, you couldn't actually download Final Fantasy 9 on the iOS because it so many people bought it at one time that it literally shut down the app. Like you couldn't actually buy it; it wouldn't process it. So yeah, Zach's 100% right.
Imagine that. Like I can't imagine playing Pokemon with friends and trading Pokemon.
on your freaking iPhone or your Note, like, oh man.
Yeah, we're all gonna be unemployed because we can't stay productive.
Nope.
So moving on to the second segment, unless anyone else had anything to add to that segment. All right,
I
so-
think we nailed it.
Yep. So moving on to the second segment here. Everyone having a couple stories or something, anything gaming related that doesn't involve like the guilty pleasures, hidden gems. Although we've kind of mentioned that a little bit here with the Pokemon stuff. I didn't realize these two were going to be so closely intertwined here. But this is kind of the section where anything gaming related that you want to talk about. I'll start. I have a couple things, but I'll do one here. It was something that I found on Twitter. That Tom actually retweeted, and then my friend Jadrian posted in a group chat that we're in. One of my favorite games, although it's not included in my top 5, it is one of my top 10, I guess. The Spyro trilogy is rumored to be getting a remastered version. And I am so excited because I've seen, I think I watched Jacksepticeye or Sean McLaughlin on YouTube, and he did a Spyro from the second and the third game. A second and third game run through, and I was so excited to watch him play it. But you could tell it didn't quite age well graphically and gameplay wise. There was a lot of issues with it that when you're kids you don't really notice about it. I would love to see a Spyro game fully fleshed out, HD graphics, complex gameplay. I'm so excited because Spyro went in a direction that I hated. I loved the original trilogy, and then the middle games were okay, and then that second trilogy they did, which I hope is not what they're referring to. I'm hoping they're referring to the original trilogy, but the second trilogy was garbage. Ember had no personality, was the female dragon that was with Spyro. She had no personality. They butchered Hunter's personality and turned, what was her name? Beatrice, the bunny that was with Hunter, turned her into a non-character. It ruined everything that I loved about the original trilogy, and just the fact that it's a rumor has me so excited to see, because it's talking about coming out the end of this year for PS4, and then Xbox One and PC in 2019. If those rumors are true, I don't think I've ever been hyped for a remake like I'd be hyped for that remake.
Yeah, I think the implications here are huge also, because I'm gonna make a comparison here to when the Sly Cooper original trilogy got remastered by Not Sucker Punch. So they remastered the trilogy, and it was beautiful, really successful. And then 1 year later, a brand new Sly game came out. So I'm not going to say anything or trying to start any rumors here, but this could imply that they're working on a new Spyro IP, like a new mainline series or game. Because that's how they pretty much did it with the Sly Remastered series, which would be even more hype. But once again, that's completely unconfirmed. That's just me making inferences based on the data that we have. So I just want to take a few moments to talk about something pretty interesting that it was a slow day at work today, so I did some research and read some articles about stuff and kept digging deeper, and what I found was this really interesting web of failures for EA, whom we probably will be talking about later, I'd imagine, because a lot of their failings have becoming quite prominent in recent days. But I mean, EA's had a really rough time their last few major releases from their big developers. Keep in mind, EA is a publisher. Obviously, we all know this, so they invest in these developers, and they kind of work together to make these games happen. So I want to go all the way back to one of EA's most prominent developers, which is, of course, bioware. Everyone loves bioware. Everyone loved the Mass Effect series, save for the very, 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 very ending. 99% of the games were awesome, and then 1% was kind of, left to rot, or not left to rot, but I'm about to talk about Andromeda, because this is where it gets kind of juicy. So, BioWare decided, or their main team, Casey Hudson, who was the big director of the Mass Effect original trilogy, decided to take his team at BioWare Edmonton, and they were going to make this new IP that they codenamed. They originally codenamed it Dylan, and the reason they codenamed it Dylan was because it was in reference to Bob Dylan, because people would reference it for years to come. That's a direct quote from Casey Hudson. So pretty interesting. So codenamed Dylan, we now know that this IP is called Anthem, as it was revealed to us at E3 last year. What we didn't know is that Mass Effect Andromeda went through a 5-year cycle of development with multiple director changes, a smaller team with pretty inexperienced animation staff, and pretty inexperienced programmers. This was all handed off, or thrown at, rather, from BioWare Edmonton, which is where the experience... I'll call them the A-team from now on. And it was thrown down to BioWare Montreal, which I'll refer to as the B-team. Now, from what I've heard and what I've read from developer interviews and anonymous developer interviews, because they don't want to badmouth their own company, well, they do, but they don't want to do it with people knowing who they are. A lot of them at BioWare Montreal pretty much said that this game was pulled in 15 different directions, and even though it had a 5-year development cycle, most of the developing for Mass Effect Andromeda was done in 18 months. Just not what you'd expect from, a mainline series like that. So I don't know what BioWare was thinking. I didn't know what Mr. Hudson was thinking. Obviously, Mass Effect is a beloved series, and honestly, only a fool wouldn't be able to predict that, handing this off to a, inexperienced development staff. Although, it's not their fault. Just because they have inexperience, I'm not criticizing them, but this was too big of a project to hand off to an inexperienced staff or an understaffed studio, in my opinion. You can't do this to Mass Effect fans. One of your biggest series, Mass Effect and Dragon Age, are both BioWare's top 2 series. I would say Mass Effect is probably higher grossing than Dragon Age. I only say that because Origins was a little bit under the radar, and then Mass Effect kind of blew up, and that's where bioware became really like mainstream. You can't do that. You can't hand off your best series, your highest grossing series, to an inexperienced, understaffed B team, which is exactly what they did. So, just for some context, let me tell you what we know exactly about Anthem right now. But we know, based on details arriving from EA and bioware, Anthem is a third-person action role-playing title that takes place in an open world that's ripe for exploration. Taking on the role of something called a freelancer, players will suit up in a mech-type exoskeleton referred to as a javelin. These suits will grant players the ability of flight, which makes traversing the areas present within the game a much more realistic task. The title will also feature a shared world, which that's a whole other can of worms I'm not going to start talking about here, but this never works. Every time they talk shared world, it sounds so great on paper, it looks so good in previews, and it just falls flat on its goddamn face when it gets released. Perfect reference is Tom Clancy's The Division. The only shared world game that I can think of right now, off the top of my head, that actually worked for a while is Destiny, and Destiny 2. But Tom Clancy's The Division, if you all remember that game, the previews at E3 were just so hype, and everyone was like, oh, this game's going to be awesome, it's going to revolutionize the genre, and it kind of just flopped. But this means the players will be able to appear in the in-game world in real time, while Anthem users are connected to the internet, allowing gamers to interact with one another, even if they aren't a dedicated party. So it's a open world game that's going to be similar to kind of a Destiny type of game. Honestly, a lot of the screenshots and a lot of the preview videos at E3 last year, it looks a little bit like a more polished Mass Effect Andromeda with the like planet exploration and stuff, and the flying and the boosters and stuff and the suits. So yeah, I don't know. It's just interesting, and so that's BioWare, and BioWare pretty much failed Mass Effect Andromeda. We all know the jokes and the memes and the videos and the gifs. Unpolished mess is what I would call it. And unlike Kingdom Come Deliverance, it was made by a AAA studio with a AAA budget, albeit they were understaffed. That it's still a AAA budget, and you had AAA money, and they really dropped the ball on it. The lowest rated BioWare game ever developed by the team, by the way, was Mass Effect Andromeda, which is definitely saying something for such a beloved series. But so that's BioWare and their recent failing. Now we move on to DICE, which is probably the other big EA developer that you think of. So DICE released a little game called Battlefront 2, and I'm not going to go too much into it because I know we're probably going to talk about it later, or even if we don't, it's been talked about so many times online, a lot of discussions, a lot of stories, everyone tweets about it. I don't know if it was DICE's doing even, it might have been EA's doing, but someone finally went too far with the loot box system. Someone screwed it up for everyone, and that someone had to be EA, of course. So once again, I don't know the full story behind this. I don't know if DICE is the one that proposed the idea, or EA kind of forced them to have this loot box system in their game. However, it was in the game, and that's terrible for DICE because Battlefront 2 is supposed to be this hype game. It finally had a single-player campaign. They had all these heroes expanding the franchise, like all across all the games. They even brought some of the new trilogy people into it, like Kylo Ren and Rey. And it was awesome. It was hype. It was ready to go. And then the loot box system and this story broke like weeks before the game was released, and everyone just killed it. It got like extremely low scores. I think it dipped below 70 for a while there. I think it's sitting at 70 or something right now on Metacritic. And the game's not even bad. Like the gameplay is not even bad. The gunplay is good. The environments are good. It looks good. It plays well. No bugs at all. But it was all about this loot box system, and it just killed them. And they sold so few copies of Battlefront 2. Well, they tried to get people back first by getting rid of the loot boxes, right? And then they they're bringing back the loot boxes and microtransactions now to try to break even with the development money that they spent on this freaking game. Ooh. So they shot themselves in the foot, and they're basically trying to remove the first bullet by shooting themselves in the foot again.
Could I cut you off for like 1 second? 'Cause I have something related to that.
Yeah, go for it. I need to breathe anyway.
All right, so this is part of my later rant, but I'm glad you brought this up because, as EA said themselves, "Oh, we need to bring back the loot box and microtransaction make up for the development cost."
Yeah.
But as Jim Sterling showed on his video, he posted a literal link to an article. It was on his channel that EA told their investors that the loss of microtransactions will have, quote, no tangible impact on profit margins. They are literally admitting that this will not affect their profit margins, but yet they're still using that as an excuse to shove it back in when gamers don't want it.
This is, well, based on what you just said and my own kind of inferences, this is clear desperation.
Definitely.
EA's very obviously desperate to break even in some capacity with this game. And in my opinion, they've already moved on to the next thing, which is what I'm going to talk about next, is DICE is releasing another game this year, very similar to BioWare. They failed with their last game, but they have this really big hype game coming out later this year, and that's Battlefield 5. It might not be called that, but it's a new Battlefield game. And honestly, I'm shocked to say that there's really not a lot of information on it. There's been rumors that they're going back to like a modern thing, like Battlefield 4, and they're going to call it Battlefield 5.
Might go to Bad Company.
Or another Bad Company game. There's been several rumors, but nothing has been confirmed yet, which is interesting. I don't know if this is purpose by EA trying to hide this game and generate hype like at the last minute in an attempt to like make sure and guarantee they sell copies of this game. Because they're going to be very cautious now. But anyway, these are two big developers, DICE and BioWare, that failed in all respects, failed in their last game, and have these really hype games ready to come out. I think Anthem comes out early 2019, and Battlefield 5, I guess I'll call it right now, is coming out in probably October in 2018. So I have a question to throw to you guys. Is that well, two questions really, but kind of related to each other. First question: how good does Anthem need to be to make up for what BioWare Montreal couldn't do or did with Mass Effect Andromeda? So how good does Anthem need to be? Is there pressure on BioWare Edmonton now and Casey Hudson himself to make this game like above 90? Does it have to be above 90 to make it seem like a success, or does sales the only thing that matters to it? And then the second question is, how good does this Battlefield 2018 have to be? And is there something to look into the fact that EA is really not revealing much about it, and it's already mid-February of the release year?
Just before Brandon goes, I don't know if you guys remember, but during E3 they announced Battlefield Hardline when there was no details about it, and then they dropped the beta that evening in June. So I mean, I wouldn't put too much weight towards there not being any information about Battlefield, because that probably is EA's most cherished franchise, with the sports games kind of failing. Like Madden and FIFA and NHL are all kind of on the downswing.
Well, how I see it with Anthem, this is EA's chance to... They're not redeeming themselves anytime soon in the public eye, but this is their chance to make themselves not trustworthy, but relevant again, because with the failure of Andromeda, the failure of Battlefront, which I will fight to the death that was an inferior game to the originals in every sense of the word that wasn't graphics and sound, Anthem is going to have to... I want to say it has to be a 90, but I don't believe in numbered scores. I feel they're arbitrary and they're subjective. But it will have to be... This is going to have like basically have to be a new Halo. It's going to have to be a new Hallmark franchise that they're going to have to build on, support, and pray to the gaming gods that it will make them reputable in the sense that people will want to buy their games, or at least this game and its franchise or its DLC or its microtransactions. Because with Battlefield 1 did okay. It wasn't a knockout of the park. It was basically a World War II game with a World War I skin. As someone who has played it extensively, I can attest to that. It was not a World War I game outside of the setting. Battlefield 1 also released its Apocalypse DLC. I think it released very recently or it's upcoming. I can't remember which. I haven't played in some time. But it's very possible they're trying to get the tail end of the Battlefield 1 DLC into their next Battlefield game so that they can just keep the Battlefield hype train running, but while also keeping their players occupied. Because Battlefield 1 almost died, and arguably you could say it could be dead. On PC, I find it hard to find more than one or two fully fledged servers of the Hallmark game mode. I forgot what it is called. The objective-based one where you get like 3 attacks.
I think it's War mode.
It's called Conquest.
Conquest, yeah.
Was it Conquest? I thought it was Assault or something.
The one with the flags, right?
Well, you have to attack
Conquest.
2 different defensive lines, and the defenders have to hold them off until their tickets bleed out. And then if you win, you get to go to another map.
Just kind of, not to interrupt you, but I want to found some new information on Anthem. Apparently, Drew Karpyshyn is writing it.
Oh.
Which is, he's the famed writer that left BioWare after Mass Effect 2. And he wrote Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic, as well as Mass Effect and Mass Effect 2.
That's good news.
That's really good news for it. So that's another big thing. He says, personally, I love Drew Karpyshyn. I think he's one of the best sci-fi game writers out there. It's a shame we couldn't finish Mass Effect for whatever reason, but maybe Anthem is his redemption.
Maybe.
Who knows? It could be interesting.
That reminds me that I feel kind of bad for the Andromeda Studios, because if you look at the studio that did them, they were never, to my knowledge, they've never been a part of a team to actually make a full game. They've been the team that they relegated. Okay, you make DLC and extra content, but like as you said, they literally used the B team to make a AAA game. They have no experience in making a full-fledged video game. They're the guys you say, okay, you're our DLC and extra credits team. That's basically what they're there for. They were in no way, shape, or form prepared for that kind of task. That game was almost doomed to fail.
Especially not in 18 months, which was the time frame they were given.
Impossible.
Yeah, and I mean, for me, I won't say that Anthem is going to have to save EA, because like you said, there's no saving EA. EA is going to forever be branded what they are. But there are things underneath them, and BioWare has a very special place in my heart. And as we'll talk about when we do our top 5 in a little bit, Mass Effect 2 is on my top 5. Mass Effect and Dragon Age are 2 of my favorite franchises. And Dragon Age Inquisition is probably at number 7 or 8 on my top 10. So, I love these franchises. But Andromeda left a very bad taste in my mouth. It is the only Mass Effect game I never finished. I couldn't beat it. I couldn't finish it. I got bored. I was so bored I could not force myself to get back into it.
Yeah.
But for me, if Anthem fails, if Anthem is... the way I'm looking at Anthem is, Anthem can do whatever it wants to do. But Anthem has to succeed in order for me to get what I believe Mass Effect and Dragon Age fans deserve, which is a good sequel to one of those 2 series. A good Mass Effect, a good continuation of the Mass Effect world. A good continuation of the Dragon Age world. Anthem has got to succeed for us to actually get a good one. Because if Anthem drops, then I don't see BioWare rebounding. And unless someone else picks up the Dragon Age or Mass Effect IPs, which is very probable, because those are very profitable IPs. But if Anthem drops and Anthem bombs, I don't see us getting a good Mass Effect or Dragon Age game again. And that's what's worrying me, and that's why Anthem has got, please come through on the hype.
And honestly, sorry, Brendan.
You're good.
Honestly, if we're using the 3 strike system, Andromeda is clearly strike 1. If Anthem flops, that's strike 2, and then they're talking about a new Dragon Age game. If that fails, that's strike 3, and I think BioWare is done.
If they drop a Dragon Age game and it bombs, because even Dragon Age 2 didn't bomb. Even Dragon Age 2 wasn't great, but it was still a good game. It had its redeeming qualities. I can't tell you a redeeming quality for Mass Effect Andromeda, So if they release a Dragon Age game and that bombs, they're done. They're done no matter what Anthem does. They're done. If they make a Dragon Age game, you got to make it good. You cannot have another Andromeda. You cannot have that happen to Dragon Age.
And see, that's what.
Go ahead.
See, that's what scares me, because if you looked at EA's track record, if you go back into the past a little bit, EA has a scary tendency to have they'll have their developers drive their franchises into the ground and then execute them off. We saw it with the Dead Space franchise and its developers that got axed recently, or I guess a year ago recently.
Rip Visceral, man.
Yeah, Visceral's dead. We've seen, the guys who made, Hardline of them, they got sacked. EA is basically just here to suck you dry of all your money and then take you out and put you out of your misery. And that could be happening to BioWare if EA just continues to drive them into the ground.
But I always looked at like BioWare and DICE. I know I'm not the only one. The BioWare and DICE is the ones that had that immunity, And then Andromeda happened, and then Battlefront 2 happened, and now like I'm fearing that they don't have that immunity that they had anymore, And that's kind of disturbing to me. And that's one more thing. Anthem's creative director Brendan Holmes did a AMA on Reddit, and of course, it was in the wake of the Battlefront 2 fiasco, so everyone was asking about loot boxes. And according to Holmes, talks about such a loot box system are still an ongoing discussion, quote unquote. But he reassured the fan that asked the question that a number of people on the dev team were also gamers, and they don't like, or they had similar concerns about such forms of monetization in games. So good sign, question mark. But I mean, I've grown to accept it, but like now it's not a question of whether loot boxes are going to be in games anymore. It's a question of how they're implemented and if they're implemented fairly. Overwatch does a great job. People hate the game, but Call of Duty World War II does a great job of putting in a fair loot box system.
I'll fight you on that.
People.
I know I'm getting crucified for that, but yeah.
What's wrong with that game that people hate?
It's Call of Duty.
I can get into that when we get to me.
But I use Call of Duty as a reference. I like the way they put in their loot box system. You don't have to drop money to get like cool variants and cool outfits for your guys. It's well implemented. Destiny does a pretty good job. Overwatch does a pretty good job. Heroes of the Storm does a pretty good job. League of Legends does a pretty good job. I mean, there are ways to implement it. EA took it way too far, and as long as they pull it back, I don't see this as a problem for Anthem. Not nearly as big as a problem as it was for Battlefront 2, because I was the victim of EA pushing it too far, in my opinion. But that's all I got. I think Anthem needs to be a very good game. Clearly, they put all their eggs into this basket. So one heck of a golden goose needs to come out of it if they're going to put all their eggs into the basket. But that's all I got.
I'll go ahead and go next, since my topic's going to be kind of funny.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
It's going to be just the value of EA Access. Like, I think it's the best. I think it's honestly, for paying for strictly like a subscription format for video games, I think it's bar none the best there is in any platform, any ecosystem you can find. I mean, you pay $30 a year, $2.50 a month for, I think what roughly equates to 20 games now that are within the last 2 years, have been released within the last 2 years. Like the catalog's like 30 or 40 games, but you can get a good 20 games that have been released within the last 2 years of the catalog that EA has. Yes, they've had some flops, but for $2.50 a month, I don't really give a damn if the game's not a 9 out of 10. Like 7 out of 10 is good enough for me. Like I get to experience video games, what I love. Like it's not a detriment for me, because I'm not spending $60 on a video game expecting $60 worth of value comparative to other video games that were $60. I'm only spending a couple bucks. Like even if you want to try it out, like Joe off the street can pay $5, get a 1 month subscription to it, and cancel it after. You pay $5, you can play any video game that EA offers on EA Access. It's just immense value. I love that system they have. Yes, some of the games that EA has done, I think it's more of a byproduct of EA. They want to believe that they are a cultivator of franchises and development teams, but they are not. They like Brandon said, they suck them dry. Like what they do is they see a little bit of talent, a little bit of ability, a little bit of creativeness inside of a franchise, and they want to drain it. They want to milk it. They say, hey, here's a bunch of money. You need to justify this bunch of money, so we're going to have you release it within a year. What? You can't release this game within a year or 18 months? Well, we gave you the money to do it. Why can't you do it? EA doesn't understand. EA is used to the iterative nature of sports franchises like Madden, FIFA, NHL, where they come out every year. So EA is like, oh, we release these games every year. Well, you release those games every year because rosters change in professional sports every single year. That's why you release those. What EA should do with sports franchises is release them once every 2 or 3 years with major updates instead of the yearly edition of minor update crap like I've experienced with FIFA. FIFA would actually be one of my top 5 games, but how they've done the past 3, 4, 5 years, it's just pathetic. I used to love that game, but it's just the idea of what they know in the sports franchises. EA has been Electronic Arts because EA, it's in the game. They were a sports developer, like that's what they did, or publisher, I should say, and they made their money off that, and now they expect that same model to go for single-player games, RPGs, what have you, and that's just not how it works. And EA suffers because they think that they can create this infinity engine for the sports games and carry it over into the RPG games. That's just not how it is. EA should get back to its root with sports games. Let single-player and RPG games be run by the studio. You can put a set time frame, but do not expedite the development of a game. Like the game I talked about earlier, the indie game, The Witness, that game was announced in 2009. It did not come out for any platform until early 2016. That's 7 years. I guarantee that game has near a 90 on Metacritic because it was worth it. The juice was worth the squeeze, and it took a little bit longer to get the good juice out of that lemon. Like that's just some case in game development. Sports franchises can live with yearly releases because very minimal things need to be changed about a sports game because we've kind of reached the pinnacle of engines for sports games. But I think EA Access is a great service. You don't need to value everything inside of it to enjoy it. It's just great value for your dollar. I don't like spending $60 a game. I get tired of that. I pay $30 a year. Don't think twice. I can go download any game they have in there, from UFC to Mass Effect Andromeda, Star Wars Battlefront, Battlefield, the entire franchise, what have you, and I can enjoy it without having to worry about, oh man, I spent $60 on this game, I have to justify it. Oh, I spent $40 on this game, I have to justify it.
Yeah, I think last time I checked, I think even Dead Space 1 and 2 were on there.
Yeah, those just got released on there. They were announced as backwards compatible through Xbox One's backwards compatible program, and then EA, I think a month after, announced that they were going to make, because it was originally just Dead Space 3, and then they brought 1 and 2 back backwards compatible, and you can get it through EA Access. So I love that service. I don't know what you guys think of it, but when it was first announced, I bought in when it was just 4 or 5 games. Now that it's completely expanded, I don't see why anyone who owns an Xbox One should not get that.
Yeah, EA Access, I believe, isn't it the thing that runs exclusively through the Xbox, I believe?
Yeah.
Xbox's thing.
They have Origin access.
No, you can get on Origin.
Which is kind of limited. It's far more limited than EA Access, but EA Access is the cream of the crop.
Yeah, and that's there's a really famous popular YouTuber called Boogie2988 who does a weekly gaming show that I listen to, about 10 minutes long, and he was actually talking about that and said that it is by far the best bang for your buck. And there's an even more expansive one that Microsoft has, and I don't know if it's like EA Access or if it's their own thing, but it's has
called the Games Pass, and it's mainly anchored on Microsoft games, but it's a similar model.
Yeah, but it has, I think, what their big announcement they made for it was that even every single Xbox exclusive from here on out will go to that Microsoft Pass.
Yep, you pay $10 a month and you can get any Xbox release.
Any of them.
The thing I love about both those models is, Redbox kind of is similar to it, but you don't have to go through Redbox. You can just be like, like the new Mass Effect's coming out, the new Dragon Age coming out. Let me just pay $5 for EA Access, play it. You get it the day it releases. Most cases, 2 or 3 days early. You get a 10-hour trial of it, and you can play it and just see if you like it. That's probably by far my most favorite, because I didn't have to spend money on FIFA 18. I got to play a few hours of it to realize it was crap, and I was like, okay, I'm not spending money on this game. Perfect. Best $5 I ever spent. That's $5 that I take out of my pocket and $55 I keep in my pocket. Great business model.
I agree. So, I guess now it's time to rant, Brandon. You got a rant ready for us. So
I got a list of things that will probably turn into rants, but he took some of my rants off when we discussed the monetization of Battlefront. So first of all, sort of a good note, I'm proud of myself. It took me probably well over 10 hours to do, but I got one of what is argued to be one of the hardest achievements in Hearts of Iron 4. Now, Little backstory, so people understand what the hell I'm talking about. Hearts of Iron 4 is a grand strategy game released by Paradox Interactive. It's the newest one in the series. While I'm on this note, the newest DLC, Waking Tiger, comes in roughly 3 weeks, which will add new focus trees and mechanics to the game, but it's going to be focusing on the Asian front of the war with the Chinese factions and the Japanese focus tree. So it's hard to explain Hearts of Iron in a grand strategy if you don't know what it is. Like, if you know what EU4 is or Europa Universalis.
I've heard of Europa.
It's similar to that.
Our friend Zach Story plays all those games, so I've heard about them.
It is similar to that. See, it's like an RTS. You have an age. Let's say it's a World War II. So let's say I'm playing as Germany. I'll start, let's say 1936. I have all my focuses open to me. And what I can do is, the way you build units is if you have military and civilian factories. Your civilian factories are used for building anything. If you want to build something, you use civilian factories for it. But if you need resource, let's say I'm Germany, I'm running low on oil, I can, let's say, give, quote unquote, or I can lend civilian factories to the Soviet Union. In exchange, they send me oil. Military factories are what you use to build all of your tanks, planes, not your ships, those are shipyards. Tanks, planes, infantry equipment, artillery, all of that. So what you do is you queue up divisions. For, let's say, if I want to build a mechanized division, that it will require 3,000, or 3 blocks, but they represent about 1,000 men. So let's say it's 3,000 infantry, 3,000 mechanized. I need to produce guns, equipment, and vehicles for that division template. And after a trading time, it'll pop out somewhere in Germany that I designate, and I can command it like everyone else and assign it to a general. So the main meat I'm talking about is, it's called the Bearer of Artillery. That name is a pun, which makes this achievement 20 times better. And I'll tell you why. This is based on a real-life bear named Wojciech, or Wojciech. I don't know how Polish pronounce the W. And it is a bear found, I believe it was by the 29th Artillery? It was either Artillery or Infantry Division of Polish soldiers who at the time were under the command of the Soviet Union, because this was after Poland had fallen to the Germans and the Russians during the invasion of Poland. They had gone to Iran and had found the bear Wojciech, and they bought him and brought him along with them. Later on during the war, the Russians sent this division to Italy to help with the Allied assault near Rome. And Wojciech was there, and the legend says, according to eyewitnesses, he helped carry artillery shells from the crates to the artillery crews and never dropped a crate. So the achievement is to A, play as Poland, B, you have to stay non-aligned. You can't go communist, democratic, or fascist. You have to own what's basically a province in North Iran, and then at the same time, you also need to have a division near the Italian capital in that region. And you can't be in an alliance with the Soviet Union. Now, to those who play Hearts of Iron, just surviving as Poland is one of the most difficult things you can do, because you have 2 nations near you who want you dead, and your industry is pretty garbage. Thankfully, I know I found an exploit online that lets me basically just get almost infinite equipment, so I could just equip my armies as I pleased, because I had the manpower to do so. And using some division templates, I kicked the living shit out of the Russians, annexed half of Russia, invaded Iran, took Iran, and then declared war on the Axis and kind of just rampaged my way over to Italy. And now I have a literal bear as one of my generals that I can assign divisions to follow his commands. And he has a unique trait that I think only he has in the vanilla game called Bearer of Artillery. And the description says never drop a crate. And he gets plus 15% to artillery attack. And it's beautiful. In other news, okay, before I forget, the real-time strategy series Dawn of War. For those in the Warhammer 40k community, this name probably means something to you, because it is a venerable franchise and very beloved over the decades it's been out. THQ, I believe, was the original makers of Dawn of War games until they went bankrupt after the release of Dawn of War 2, which I know that sounds bad, but Dawn of War 2 I would not say is a flop to kill the company. It's just financially they weren't doing well, and they just couldn't stop the downward spiral. Dawn of War 3 came out less than a year ago. The fans were not happy, I was not happy. It's hard to explain to a non-Dawn of War fan why we disliked it, because it's kind of like if I didn't know what StarCraft was and they made a new StarCraft game and the fans didn't like it because it quote unquote wasn't a StarCraft game, I wouldn't know what you're talking about. But to sum it up, they had stripped away any meaningful mechanics to the game. You could tell they were trying to make Dawn of War into StarCraft with this game, and you can tell it clashed horribly. The lore was completely ignored with somersaulting Space Marines and Terminator armor, which I know means nothing to most of you, but that triggers me into the next dimension. They removed unit veterancy, which it's in Company of Heroes 2 and in Dawn of War games, to where if a unit survives combat, taking hits, dealing damage, getting kills, it will gain experience. And it can level up to where it will get a base increase to all of its stats, which means, hey, you should keep these units alive because they're worth more if you don't just throw them to the slaughter. That was removed in Dawn of War 3. In Dawn of War 3, they also gave you magic bubbles that were around the map. If you took over the bubbles, you got a shield that made you 100% immune to any range damage until the shield was destroyed, and melee units could not enter the shield to engage you in melee. So on certain maps, they were useless. On other maps, they dominated the entire battlefield. There was no balance. And there are other issues like the art style and certain characters, but in general, they ripped out what made Dawn of War, and as of, I believe, last week, the developers have openly stated they have stopped any and all support for the game. It is officially dead within a year of release. Now, to those of us who kept an eye on it, that game's player base had dipped to dead levels after the launch month, to the point where a Dawn of War 1 title, Dawn of War Soulstorm, which isn't considered the best in the franchise, had more active players than Dawn of War 3. They released one balance patch for the game in its lifespan and one patch to give it some skins, and that's it. And the fan base is enraged. If you go to the store page, it has been review bombed into oblivion. And what makes fans like me sad for the Dawn of War series is that this could be the death of the franchise, to where Relic would look at this and go, well, the fans don't want a Dawn of War game anymore, so we're not just going to make any more. And that's sad. Because if you look at Dawn of War 1 and 2, they still have, arguably small by modern standards, but far more active than Dawn of War 3. They have active player bases. They have active modding communities. If you look at Dawn of War 1 with the Ultimate Apocalypse mod, you can do more in that game than you can do in any other Dawn of War game. You can bring Titans to the battlefield. They added entirely new custom factions with their own unique mechanics, voice lines, and strategies, arguably. And these are modders working for free who are doing better work than the AAA publishers of video games. Now, you could argue they're building off the template of what somebody else made, but they've basically made their own game at this point. And it's almost laughable that despite all the criticism because even before the game released, people were voicing concern after concern, and developers just brushed it aside. And now we've seen what happens, the possible death of a venerable franchise, and it's saddening.
Yeah, I was just taking a look at something really quickly when you mentioned that the Dawn of War 1 still has a 10 out of 10 on Steam, and it actually has more recent reviews than Dawn of War 3.
Yep.
And that's Dawn of War 1 has more recent reviews than Dawn of War 3.
Is that original Winter Assault, Dark Crusade, or Soulstorm?
I don't see it. It's the Game of the Year edition on Steam.
The original. That was the original.
Yeah.
Because there's roughly 4 Dawn of War 1s, and then there's Dawn of War 2, and then the Up to Retribution, which I play out of most of all of them. But to anyone who has played Dawn of War 1 or 2, you can look at Dawn of War and say, that's not a Dawn. In fact, if it had not been called Dawn of War, I may have given it a bit more of a slack than I did. But when you use the name of a venerable franchise, we have expectations. We expect synchronized kills. We expect at least a moderate attempt at a cover system. We expect at least some adherence to the lore. Like, similar things would be like, let's say, to give comparison to the somersaulting Terminators, imagine you're playing Warcraft 3, And when the Tauren Chieftain you stomped, he jumps like 10 feet in the air and does 3 somersaults before landing. That's ridiculous. That would never happen, and it would totally break you out of the game, and you'd actually probably laugh at it. You're supposed to take this seriously. That's how ridiculous it is. That's why a lot of us were upset that they just completely disrespected the franchise, and now they're probably killing it off because they were incompetent.
Yeah, and I kind of going back to your point where it's like, if this game was made under any title, it would have done better. The Final Fantasy game. Everyone knows that Final Fantasy is my favorite franchise of all time, and Final Fantasy 13. It was fun when I played it, but when I sat back and thought about it, it's like this doesn't really fit the Final Fantasy makeup, minus the main character Lightning. She's about the only redeeming quality of the entire game, which is why she's the only face anyone recognizes when you talk about Final Fantasy 13. But if that game came out under any other name, I think that game would have been much more accepted. Even if Square Enix had made that game under a different IP or a one-off game or one-off, that game would have been so much better. But when you put Final Fantasy on something, you expect
you have expectations.
Mass Effect Andromeda, going back to that point.
Yeah.
When you put that title on something, immediate expectations jump on it. You've got to meet those expectations, or else it's going to fall flat.
You condition your audience to expect something, and when you don't deliver it, they get angry. Cause and effect. Mm-hmm. A similar thing with Fallout 4. I was not a fan of 4. I had to mod it so I could finish it because I got so bored, and then I was like, let's see what New Vegas is about. I played like 4 playthroughs of New Vegas. Like, can we have Obsidian make a Fallout game again, please? I know I know
New Vegas is Bay.
It's like it's the best in the franchise. I haven't played 1 and 2. People tell me those might be better, and for it. But
one is impossible. I can't even get past the beginning of Fallout 1.
Yeah,
it's 1 and 2 are both very like old school, like top down over the hardcore games. It was very niche audience.
Oh, I'm so stupid. I just remembered a gem that I have right here on the game that I forgot to fucking mention. Divinity Original Sin 2.
Yeah, I've heard a lot about that, because you've mentioned it to me, and then our other friend, Zach, different Zach, mentioned that game. I've seen him play it on Steam all the time.
Yeah, I only have 12 hours in, so for an RPG like this, it's not very far. I'm not really out of the starting area yet, basically. I haven't finished it. I don't know why I haven't felt the urge to play it more often, probably because it requires a long time commitment. Mm-hmm. But as my friend basically describes it to me, it's basically you're playing a D&D campaign except top down and you can see shit. There's environmental effects. In fact, you can do some pre-planning. I have a mage in my party, and she can, outside of combat, cast a rain spell to make all the ground around us wet. And if I want to engage combat, I can just shoot lightning on the water and zap everybody, and then engage combat while there's... What blew my mind is that I have not found an invincible character. I have genocided the entire starter zone of NPCs. I'm like, you know what? Is there anyone here I'm not allowed to kill? And the game's like, nope, everyone can be murdered violently.
Thanks, Skyrim, for creating that debacle.
Yeah, although I think Skyrim has an excuse because there are quest NPCs that if they die, you just can't continue.
Yeah.
But I love the pet perk, whatever it's called, when you start the game. Now I can talk to animals. And I have, discovered entirely new ways to resolve situations, find hidden items, or even... I think I avoided an entire fight area because I was able to talk to the local lava slug. It's like, hey, you are like a queen who was turned into a lava slug. Sure, I'll deliver your message to the world, just don't kill me. And I was able to go through there without a single fight. And then I went back to the starter zone and murdered a bunch of guards because they were out on patrol away from their friends. It's really interesting, and has pre-made characters for you in the sense that they have their own voice lines, they have their own special dialogue, and they have their own special backstory that is important. And you can choose any of them, but you can also make your own character, and you can play as an undead. And what I find interesting about the undead, and also one of the characters, Fade, is an undead. You have to keep your body covered at all times, because if people see that you're an undead, you will be attacked on sight. So it's almost like an interesting little built-in role-playing element that you have to have armor or clothing on, or else people will try to kill you because you're an undead. And poison heals you, but healing spells and healing potions hurt you. So you can use the environment to your effect at times where, oh, there's a poison barrel. I'm going to smack it open, poison all of my enemies around me, but I'm going to be healed. And it's great. And I really want to play more of it. I don't know why I don't. I think that is a definite gem that more people could play. And you can play co-op with your friend. You can do a co-op campaign with mods, and you can just run through the game with a party of your friends. Definitely, I would definitely check that out. It's cheap. I think it's technically still in early access. I don't remember.
I think I saw it earlier. It was early access.
It feels like a full release to me. I have not found or heard any issues, but it's very cheap right now. I think it's a steal for the price.
But for due to timing, I'm sure we have other stories to talk about, and I've already knowing I really like this the way we do this, but we do have to get to the final section here. And so for today, I wanted to talk each of us sort of explain. To kind of go into a little bit of detail of what type of gamers that we are, your top 5 games. A brief description as to why they are. I don't know if you guys wanted to go through your entire list, or if we all wanted to name our 5, then we all name our 4. How did y'all want to do this?
We can just, go through top 5, maybe like a 1-sentence explanation of why they're there.
Yeah, if
just to get some context. What I'm doing is so I don't have 2 BioShock games and 3 Mass Effect games in my top 5 list. I'm just going to go series at some points.
Yeah, I feel you. I'm the same way. I'll start just, for sort of direction. So I would say probably my number 5 game of all time is a PlayStation 1 classic. And it's called Legend of Dragoon. And I don't know if any of y'all have played it, but I do know our friend Colin has played it.
I watched your dad play it.
Yeah, who was supposed to be here with us tonight. Legend of Dragoon was phenomenal. It was a very unique gameplay, very unique fighting system, very unique elemental system. Each character exhibited a different element, but it wasn't overdone. The Dragoon system was fantastic. Leveling up the Dragoons. The story was, honestly, story alone puts it in my top 5. It's probably got my top 2 or top 3 story of all time. Just phenomenal game. I love it. They made it for the PSP. I think it's even on the PlayStation 4 store. I have to take a look, because if it is, I got to get that game again. That's one of those games that I would buy 1,000,000 times for every system I can. If you can get it, if you can find a way to get it, get that game. It's fantastic. Number 4, since we mentioned Mass Effect, I gotta put a Mass Effect game on here. Mass Effect 2 was easily the best Mass Effect game overall. I didn't hate 3 like everyone else did. I didn't hate the ending of 3. I actually thought it made sense. The Reapers are an unbeatable entity. You kind of have to do something a bit sacrificial and a bit, it was a realistic ending. It might upset people because people didn't want to see Shepard go the way he did, but it was a realistic ending. But 2 was by far the best game overall. Had some of the most emotional scenes of any game I've ever played. And it really made me connect with Shepard, which makes me put Shepard as one of my top characters of all time by itself. Garrus is up there. Tali, the character arcs for all of them was just heart-wrenching for me. And it had probably one of the best endings of all time. My number 3 game, some of y'all might judge me for this, I don't know, is Kingdom Hearts 2. I personally love the Kingdom Hearts story, as convoluted as it can be. If you break it down and you really understand it all, which me and Jadrian and other people have done multiple times, it's got a phenomenal story. And I absolutely love the characters. I love Sora. I love Kairi. I love Riku. It made Disney a serious game. And of course, made by Square Enix, so it's got the Final Fantasy pieces to this, so that's going to be my fancy. But just a beautiful marriage of Disney and Final Fantasy and Square Enix in general is Kingdom Hearts, and I can't wait for 3. Cannot wait for 3. And if you guys want to see Kingdom Hearts 2 on the channel, drop a comment down below, because I wouldn't mind playing for it. The number 2 game is going to be a more recent game, and that's The Witcher 3. I've never played a Witcher game. I watched my dad play Witcher 2. and I never really played much of Witcher 1. I've never heard about it. But The Witcher 3 probably has one of my favorite battle systems and gameplay systems that I've ever seen. And the overall story is fantastic. The characters are, for me, and I don't know if you could tell by the way my list has gone right now, story is huge for me. If a game has a good story and good characters, I can deal with some clinky game controls. But so far, as you can tell, the top 5 here have been a perfect marriage of story, character, and gameplay. Number 1 doesn't really have the gameplay, and that's Final Fantasy X. Is by far my favorite game of all time. I've played that game multiple times. It was the first Final Fantasy game that I completed in full. It was actually the first game I ever had for the PS2. Outside of Spyro, it was probably the game I spent the most of my childhood on, you know. I didn't have the best childhood growing up. Brandon knows that more than anybody. And Final Fantasy X was really my escape for everything. I would spend hours upon hours just doing the random quests on that game. Tidus has always been referred to as myself in game form, including the awkward laugh that no one can forget. And Yuna, if I was to list waifus for video games that I would love to be real, Yuna is at the top of my list. Just a phenomenal story. Best story of any game I've ever played. You know, the beginning is slow, and I know that's what some people end up losing it up. Oh, they played the first hour or 5 and go, this game's not going to pick up. The game picks up and it snowballs, and it's fantastic. And if you haven't played at least the first half of the game, you don't know what you're missing. And I stand by that fact, wholesale. But that's my top 5. You know, RPG heavy, minus maybe Mass Effect, but that's typically my gameplay. So.
All right, since Eric used all of our time, I'll try to make this quick.
Hey, shut up.
I might get crucified for this list. I might not, though. We'll see. Number 5 for me, I'm gonna say Dead Space series, and yeah, for the sake of like listing, I'm gonna use series just because I like following a series. So, number 5 for me is Dead Space series, and the reason behind this is it was the first game. Well, at least the original game, the original Dead Space, was the first game that after I finished the game, I sat on my couch and I put the controller down, and I just sat there and thought for a good hour, long after the credits stopped rolling. And it was the first game that made me feel like shell-shocked after playing it, and it was an amazing feeling. Obviously, many games have done that for me since then, but Dead Space was certainly the first. And also, I have really fond memories of sitting in our dark basement playing Dead Space with my older brother, and both of us jumping at the jump scares, and it was all like really good memories and nostalgia for me. So Dead Space is definitely one of my favorite series of all time. Number 4 is the BioShock series. Infinite came out years ago, and I'm still trying to figure out what the hell the ending meant. But BioShock is just so fantastic. The whole series is just amazing. The storytelling, the mind-blowing twists, even the little hiccup in the series too was really good, despite the weird as hell multiplayer. I don't even want to get into that. That's a whole nother hour and a half discussion about what the heck BioShock 2's multiplayer was. But story-wise, they're all good. I mean, and BioShock Infinite was just the greatest send-off I've ever seen for a video game series of all time. I want more BioShock, but I wouldn't mind Infinite being the last game either. Number 3 is going to be the Persona series, the Shin Megami Tensei Persona series. Recently released Persona 5 was fantastic. Everyone loved it. The game series was actually introduced to me by our friend Zach, who helped me install a PS2 emulator on my computer, and I played through Persona 4, the original game on my computer, and then I ended up buying Persona 3 on my PS3 because it was re-released for it, and I loved that game, and I played. Eventually, Persona 4 was also re-released for the PS3, and I played through that. And ever since I beat that game, way back when, I was waiting for Persona 5, and then Golden came out and it made improvements to 4, and then 5 came out and made improvements to Golden. And the Persona series is just, I've never seen a series get better. You thought 3 was a perfect game, then 4 came out, and you thought 4 was a perfect game, and then Golden came out. You thought Golden was the perfect game, and then Persona 5 came out, and they kept getting better, and I've never seen a game series do that. Atlas is just amazing at progressively getting better throughout a series, and I think that's just definitely something to behold among game developers. Number 2, special place in my heart, the Fallout series. Bugs and all, game crashes and all, deleting saves and all. I love the Fallout series so much. I can overlook the bugs because I love post-apocalyptic stuff. I love traversing the wasteland, seeing these scavengers, seeing people trying to survive. It's fantastic. I love the Fallout series. It's everything an RPG should be. Great environment, great characters, really, really good development systems, and a unique combat system with the VAT system. Still one of the most unique combat systems I've ever seen in the game. To this day, across 3 games, Fallout 3, Fallout New Vegas, and Fallout 4, I probably have over 500, maybe 600 hours into those games. I've poured so much of my life into the Fallout series. So yeah, Fallout series number 2, and number 1. For those in this podcast that know me, this should come as no surprise. Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time. Since the year 2000, when I got the game with my N64 and my siblings, and I got it on for Christmas that year. I've beaten Ocarina of Time no less than 25 times. Several of those doing different things to challenge myself, including speed runs, 3 heart runs. I beat the game in one night once, and I keep coming back to it. It's timeless. It's amazing. It's one of the best games of all time, and my favorite game of all time.
So, did you want to go first or me?
Woo! Is it my turn?
Sure, go ahead.
All right. So, starting number 5, one series that my brother and I played immensely when we were growing up. We even got the 20-game edition when it came out, but the Command & Conquer series. He and I, when we first started playing video games, it was Pokemon, and then different Nintendo games like Mario Party, Smash Brothers, and stuff like that. But man, when we got a computer in our house and both of us got to play it, we just played Command & Conquer over and over again. Red Alert, Generals, Tiberium Wars. When all those came out, we just played the hell out of that. So much fun. Love that series. Great RTS series. Number 4, I kind of combined it. I did the NFL and NBA Street series. I played that, and to a lesser extent, the NBA Ballers game. That was a pretty good game. But NBA Street, NFL Street. NFL Street was the first game I ever got 1,000 gamer score on Xbox with. I love that game. Love NBA Street. I used to play those for hours. I would complete the game, then just play the computer on the hardest mode there was, and just keep playing and playing and playing. Love that game, man. I was so excited back in the day. Number 3, I did FIFA 2014. It was the last good FIFA I ever played. FIFA since then has just been on an exponentially downward spiral. FIFA used to be the pinnacle of sports games. It dominated the market. Pro Evolution Soccer was non-existent. Football Manager was just starting back then. FIFA was the sports game. It was the biggest sports game in the world back then. Loved it. This was the first year when there wasn't any gimmick. 2011, 12, 13 all had a gimmick that you can do on offense where you can get an easy goal on the other team. But this was the first game where they kind of fine-tuned it to the highest respect and couldn't get any easy shots, and it was awesome. Winning a game on there felt satisfying. Number 2, I didn't really do a series or a specific game, but I said Blizzard Entertainment. As I'm sure all the guys in this podcast that have played video games with me, or anybody that's going to be listening, knows that I love Blizzard games. In order from what I played is World of Warcraft. I started that when I was in high school. Did it with my brother, and then we got our uncle into it, and we just played the hell out of that. It was definitely a grinding game back then. They've implemented a lot of new user-friendly mechanics in the game to get you leveled up quick and around the top level, which is where you kind of lose interest if you don't have the time to put into it with the late game. Dungeon runs and raids and Heroics and all those. But yeah, started with World of Warcraft, then went to StarCraft 2, did that a little bit with my brother, then did Heroes of the Storm when that came out, and did Hearthstone. Pretty much just been on a constant rotation of Hearthstone and Heroes for the past few years. And then when Overwatch came out, I mean, what hasn't been said about Overwatch? Blizzard masters the easy to learn, hard to master game model, and Overwatch is a fine example of that. It's a very aesthetically pleasing game, as all Blizzard games are, and it takes a lot of skill to get really good at it, and I admire that in all Blizzard games. And then number one, as I'm sure anybody can guess, is Rocket League. I mean, it has given me, since its release on PC when I got it on my crappy 2011 computer, graphics weren't good. I couldn't appreciate it for what it's worth, and when I got on Xbox, it was very, very nice to look at on a 4K television. But Rocket League gives me the same joy that FIFA used to give me. It kind of filled that void from when I kind of wound myself out of FIFA and wanted to play something else, and Rocket League was there to save me. I love Rocket League. It's pretty much Hot Wheel soccer. Like, I love it. It's a fun game. It's a physics-based game, so it takes a lot of skill to play, and nothing in that game you can loot box your way into being better than somebody. It's all the items you unlock through their loot box model, which is crates, is cosmetics. Like, just make your car look better. You can make your car look sweet. Most of the cars have very similar hitboxes and speeds and power sliding mechanics, but I love Rocket League to death. If I could, I would have bought a computer way back when and got that game on it, and just bought a high-powered desktop just for that purpose. But those are my top 5 games.
Now, I don't know if I could choose a top 5 in a particular order, so I'm not going to put these above one another, but I'll just list them from 5 to 1. The first one that comes to my mind is Star Wars Republic Commando. I will fight anyone who dares to say that this is probably not one of, if not the best, squad-based, first-person shooters ever made. Your squad AI was smart, they were useful, you felt like you were part of a commando unit, but you weren't a superhero. You were still a soldier, just like your squad mates, and you could all die just as easy. The first mission took me at least 2 hours to finish. It was heart-wrenching at the end, and I demand a sequel, you bastards. Give me Imperial Commando. Another one I'd have to list for the fourth one would be Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic, the original. I liked 2, I respect 2, but as it was released with unfinished content, and even after installing the restored content mod, I couldn't access it. It kind of was wonky and fell flat on its face. The original had one of the greatest plot twists in RPGs I've ever played. The mechanics, while you could exploit some very overpowered combos late game, the story always had me enticed. You could make tangible choices that could completely affect your squad mates, how the story ended, what happened to your character, and even what powers you could access. That will always be a hallmark of how I judge RPGs. Another one that would make me judge RPGs is number 3, which is Fallout New Vegas. The amount of choice you get in this game is, to this day, almost unchallenged. From the moment you step out into the world, into the starter town, you are immediately presented with branching paths, numerous choices that actually matter and physically affect the game world, including the ending, to where it recalls what happened to all the factions you encountered, all the companions you encountered. Every choice you made had an outcome that was tangible. The only problem I ever had with it is that you couldn't play past the ending. Another one I'd have to say that classic RTS that I believe was one of the first games to get me into the real-time strategy genre, to me is still a timeless classic and still gets mods to this day. Star Wars Empire at War. Arguably one of the greatest Star Wars games ever made. Space and ground combat. Has a Galactic Civil War campaign with missions you can do. You can conquer the galaxy as the Empire or the Rebellion. There's countless mods to turn it into the Clone Wars area or add Mandalorians, and the content is almost endless. And recently, I believe it was last year, they updated the game so you can once again play multiplayer without a third-party client through Steam. And for my last one, I'd have to say, for the game I've probably put the most hours I've ever put into a video game into, Warhammer 40,000, Dawn of War 2 Retribution, the most recent game right before Dawn of War. I've put 705 hours in this game to the point where I've memorized most of the unit costs and build times. I spent almost every day home from school playing with my friends, every waking moment on my weekends doing the exact same thing, and I never got tired. While the campaign could be slightly repetitive, if you've played it once as one race, you've played it mostly as the other races with different dialogue and slightly different objectives, but your endings were different, and the flavor was enough for me because orcs are hilarious. It was not large scale like the original Dawn of War was, nor did it have base building, so I understand why people didn't like it over the first. But unlike Dawn of War 3, you could not look a man in the eye and say, that's not a Dawn of War game, because it exemplified what a Dawn of War is. It did it differently, yes. To me, it refined it to where it was less grindy and large-scale blob warfare and more tactical squad-based combat, but to each their own. And I hope that if we get Dawn of War 4, they take at least a few notes out of Dawn of War 2's book. And I believe that's it for me.
Alrighty. So, as far as timing goes, this timing is actually not bad. I wanted to try to keep these podcasts to about an hour to an hour and a half, just because, we're only doing these once a month. But I think it's went pretty well. Little ranty at parts. We'll clean it up for next time. But this is our first time doing one of these podcasts. So, like the sports podcast, I'm going to obviously try to include time cards down in the description down below. So you guys can kind of bounce around. If you're not favoring a certain story, you can always skip ahead, listen to a story you're more interested in. But honestly, I would love. Hopefully, you guys enjoy the entire podcast. We're going to be doing these once a month. Sports podcast will be at the beginning of the month. Gaming podcast will be in the middle of the month. We'll change up the guests. Hopefully, we'll have James back next time. Brandon, really enjoyed having you here. We don't play a lot of the RTS strategy games, but those are definitely a huge following and fan base for those. So we're really glad to have your expertise on that. And Zach, of course, for the sports games and EA information as well. So, anyone have any closing thoughts before we sign off?
I think this went pretty well generally. I think we were good at spacing things out and doing one person to the next and pretty orderly. I'm a tiny bit sad I didn't get to go on my rampage against Call of Duty World at War boxes, but I'll pick that fight another day, I suppose. I can't wait to do this again. I hope this becomes a regular thing. More news, more stuff. I didn't get to talk about Dragon Ball FighterZ or anything. We've always got content.
Just wait until E3 season comes along.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. It's gonna be juicy.
Yeah, a lot of.
Yeah, that's it for us, guys. Like I said, we are the Nomads. Brandon, thank you so much for once again being here with us. Definitely will have you back. Please, guys, share the podcast, share it around. Gaming, ironically, is probably a bit easier to reach out for people than the sports podcast was. Share this podcast around, because you'll never know who actually might enjoy listening to it. And we're really trying to make this baby sing. As far as YouTube goes, we've recently experienced a ton of growth. I've got a couple projects that I'm working on to sort of celebrate 70 subs. Hopefully we'll hit 100 by the end of the month. These podcasts really help, so share this podcast around, guys.
As Zach said, the juice will be worth the squeeze.
Yep, the juice will be worth. Alright, guys. Well, that was it for us. Like I said, my name is Eric.
My name is Tom.
My name's Zach.
And I'm Brandon.
And we will see you guys next time.
Hasta vidania.
Peace.